Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here and envious that you have been talking about what is of great interest to me about light for several days already, and I understand also for several years. And as I heard, some of you are becoming almost family, coming here every second year. So I hope to be able to join that family if you will adopt me or something like that. But it's so exciting, and needless to say, I am also excited to talk about people who know a lot about what I pretend to be a little bit involved with, such as light. So I wanted to start with just walk you through a few projects and talk about the way I have arrived at the use of light in my art. And then, as Mikael just said, we sort of expand that a little bit. When I talked to the participants in my school, I started, or at the beginning at least, I talked about, well, what's the difference between being on the beach facing the ocean, trying to express or verbalize or put language in this case, but put shape on what you have in front of you, and then turning yourself around and facing the land side, and then verbalize and express yourself and give shape to what you, give structure to what you see. And I think, as we can imagine, it's obvious that after a few words, you run out of words looking at the ocean, because it is, what should we call it, sort of non-quantifiable to some extent, right? So water, light, air, clouds, waves, and then you sort of run out. Whereas the other side, there's like lots of houses, parking lots, grass, and this and that, and so on and so on. And I think one of the great things about light is that, we have a very confident, and now you, of course, is maybe the exception, right, because you're professionals, but we have a very comfortable relationship with light without necessarily having to force it into the pragmatic verbalization or the quantifiable structure. Right? So I think what is exciting about something like light, or we could say the ephemera that I was talking about on the beach, is to a great extent that it is something that we feel familiar with without having actually yet verbalized it. Right? So when we have not verbalized it yet, and now I will get closer to why I think it's also a little bit related to art, when we haven't quite verbalized it yet, and verbalizing could be adding a form to it, right? Giving a word to a feeling is also giving a shape to a feeling or something. But when we haven't quite verbalized it, it is very often also about we are at ease with it in a state where we have it in us, consciously, emotionally, instinctively, intuitively. We are familiar with it, but talking about it hasn't quite evolved yet, right? And this, I think, is something that we should not underestimate the importance of. Something that we are comfortable with, but we are not necessarily in a situation where we have to verbalize it. And verbalizing it might take away exactly what makes it so special to us, right? So essentially, I think making a work of art is connecting an idea with action. This is simplifying or generalizing a little bit, but generally speaking, you have an idea, right? The idea might not be verbalized yet, so it's a feeling, I have a certain sort of sense, instinctive maybe, or you're just trying to push something, and then you add a sketch, right? Then you add a drawing, a napkin drawing, a bigger drawing, a little model. Then you might make a digital model. You might ask a scientist, an engineer, or a social scientist or something. And gradually this idea takes a trajectory, a path, and it becomes form, right? It gets a body. That body can be language also. Suddenly you can speak about your idea, right? And then gradually you have started shaping the world. And this is why I think culture is so interesting, because culture is very much about your ability to take something which we call an idea, and really think we should celebrate that some ideas just exist as emotional matter, and then we gradually, step by step, turn that into action. This action could be a painting, could be a sculpture, but could also be a performance, a theater play, a book, a piece of music, but it could essentially also be really anything else. And this journey, or this process, is so liberating, I think, being an artist, because this is the journey through which you connect with the world, because you are, in this process, in the position of shaping the world. This might not be on a very measurable way, but it's more the sort of the gratifying feeling of having or being in a situation where you are actually feeling a part of something which is bigger than yourself. Feeling a part of something is, in a way, about feeling connected, or it also, I guess, means that a certain feeling that what one does actually puts you into a system where you feel that it matters. Maybe it doesn't matter a lot, but it somehow is different than the feeling, oh, it doesn't matter at all. Then I might not do it, right? So this, I just want to talk about what I think is creative in this, or artistic or something. People mistakenly often think that it is turning the sketch into a model, or whatever, red to blue, or this or that. Right? But that's not what makes it creative. It is the consequences of all these choices in terms of the creative impact it has on the world. It is the shaping of the world that makes it creative. It's not the shaping of the object, of the thing. It's not the design as an autonomous project. It is what brought you to the problem and what is the consequences of having you addressing this problem. So the creative potential, you could say the creative performativity, the agency, the affordancy, the kind of way that creativity is bound into our society lays outside of the actual artistic work itself. Right? So this is, I think, a nice little introduction. And this is why I think it is absolutely worth being on the beach, looking at the water and sky, and somehow address the point that it is actually hard to put words onto what you are looking at. And still a healthy exercise, and to see when does wording become a sculptural exercise. It was fantastic, to actually be able to express what you're seeing, which is, of course, the sculpting tool of a great poet, maybe. But it's so exciting. So let me just, I was supposed to start this a while ago already. So this is a kind of 13 years ago at the Tate Modern here in London. I thought I should start with that being back here. Turbine Hall, newly opened, Tate Modern, South Bank, Hertog Dømmerån, power station, coal power energy, South Bank, all this. So long history of fossil fuels, if you want, right? So anyway, so here we have it. The generator was still humming next door. Now they closed that too, right? But so there's two huge generators just behind the walls. Very nice. So I said, okay, let's see, what is it that people in England, and I don't mean to patronize anybody, but the people in England, why is it so that they can talk about the weather, disagreeing, and still be friends? Right? It's so interesting that they say, oh, I really like this rain, I hate this rain, and they're still together. And so you could look at the weather phenomena as a social construct which is inclusive, right? So if you look at the rest of society, you have a shop, marketing environments such as politics or finance sectors or something. If people agree, there's immediately, let's not say immediately exclusion, but there's a higher degree of exclusion. You have populism in politics, right? So if you disagree, you're not welcome. Oh, you think this is not nice? Maybe you should look for another sort of space to be in. So this is why I think cultural institutions, art, creativity maybe, has the benefit of hosting people's feeling without doing it on the expense of the so-called other, right? The other in social theory, the other, the stranger, the person that you are about to meet but having not met yet. So I was so excited about the weather project, which for me was about addressing how do we share something without having to agree, which is so difficult. How do we address being singular and plural at the same time? This is how I came to the Tate, and this is how I presented my idea to them. Let's exercise a cultural institution which is hosting people so that we exercise the trust to the extent of making people the producers. We know that our society has very much focused on the optimization of making people into consumers, right? Consume, right? So what does it mean to turn, or how do we host or create a space? What is the affordance? What is the atmosphere? What is the ephemeral quality, the hospitality of a space which trusts people, or the visitor, a civic society, if it's public space, right, to say, well, you are good enough to produce the place. We hand you over the responsibility to co-author the constitutional matter in the space. That's how I work then. I just do enough to see if people will feel comfortable with taking over the responsibility of making this into a work of art. So I'm really only half the artist, right? The other half is you, if you go, right? So I think this is quite important, because I do think that let's just face it and say the privatization of public space has eliminated the trust in people being able to generate space themselves. Because everybody's just being fed spaces in a very predictable and consumer-friendly, essentially not trust-driving way. So there's a lot of sort of words like trust and civic society in these. Of course, low sodium lights, very cheap, SOX, OSRAM, because you know probably all these things. So behind half disc under a mirror is the full disc, the upper half is the mirror, as you can see. To give this space depth, I added a little bit of mist, because we all know that if there is no mist, it's hard to tell because it's just so big, right? So what's the distance, and so on and so forth. So with mist, you look 30 meters to the mirror, and then you look 30 meters down again, and you see the mist 2 times, in one way and one way. And that means the mist you see is actually not it's a lovely trick. What do you say? Smoke and mirror kind of trick, right? Anyway, so double sunset in Utrecht, same idea. So is reality relative, right? Are we consuming a static, non-negotiable reality? Or are we, in fact, the producers of our reality? Can we make the sun ourselves? Are we strong enough to take the lead? Of course, it's a playful, this is in Utrecht, looking at from the center of town towards the sunset, towards the west, right? Yeah, the sun sets in west, yes. Another project, sun-related, it's a rainbow panorama pavilion, top floor for a museum in Aarhus in Denmark. It's a glass structure, a lot of engineering to make it appear to be relatively floating. Structural glass, filter. Many things to be said. Here again, so if you want to change the color, what do? Well, you walk. Right? This means the more you move, the more the color changes. So you're sort of seeing the piece or the work of art with your feet. Right? If you don't move, it won't change. To suggest that the movement is the carrier or the producing phenomenon is a little bit different than the way that the museum would normally present it, because then you sort of, boom, there's a painting, lovely, Skagens maler, the Skagens painter, right? And you stand a bit, so timelessness, like it's like truth, essentialism, right? Non-negotiability. So old art history, Kultur here in London. Or do you say the walking up to the painting and the walking away from the painting is a part of the experience? So in the art world, you have lots of nerds like me who can talk a lot of time. What's the difference between standing still and moving and so on? And as the Skagens painters are about light as well. Another attempt to use glass and glass coated with, in this case, acrylic, occasionally the acrylic, sometimes float glass and sometimes ionized glass, and then with a light illumination structure, an LED structure inside of it, which I didn't bring a photo of for some reason. But this is the Harbour Concert Hall in Iceland by the HLT architects, HLT architects in Denmark, who did the interior, and I did the skin cladding, which also performed both let's say, identity role of the building, but also a climate challenge, as Iceland, as we know, takes a great pride in being very climate conscious. Another public space project, a bridge just opened last week in Denmark, 2 weeks ago in Denmark. Light, very sparsely lit, well under the EU-regulated suggestions, collaborating with the city of Copenhagen to see how little light do we do, and doesn't look much on a photo, but the atmospheric quality of actually being there allows for, I think, a very generous light experience. The light is in the handrail, and as you can see, a little LED up and down on the pole. I am of the school that believes that buildings should have a nap at night and not be illuminated. Buildings should sleep, but my little bridge can should have a little light, of course. Movement, public space, civic space. How do we meet each other, right? What does it mean to, walk up to somebody and do you feel comfortable meeting somebody you don't know? Are we generally encouraged to be more explorative when we walk in public space, or is public space a non-explorative facilitator? Do we close? Are we more defensive? So the small islands are meeting spots, right? So this is a place, it's a very long side of the harbor where the bicycles in Denmark, they race at high speed very often. And now they are forced to slow down, zigzagging, trying not to hit each other, and more likely to meet, I would say. So it's a sort of it's a kind of little piazza, if you want, on the water, a sequence of smaller spaces. Another way of suggesting that temporality actually makes a difference in public space. I'm skipping through a little bit faster, but just it's more about the principle. You know waterfalls, of course, very well. So you look at a waterfall and then you see, it's falling. But by looking at a waterfall, you actually also see how far away it is, because if it falls very slow, it's a big waterfall far away, If it falls very fast, it's a small waterfall close by. Sometimes we are in spaces, landscapes, great landscapes like Greenland or Iceland or the Simeon Mountains in Ethiopia, where you have this drop cliff down 1 kilometer, and then you sit with your legs over the cliff, and you go, it's amazing to look down on the birds flying underneath you. And then you look over to the side or somewhere, you see a waterfall, and you see the water just fall so slowly, because it has to fall almost a kilometer. And then you realize, it's really tall. It's really far down. So the water allowed you to embody the space, right? It's like a scaling tool. So water adds, I think, a dimension in space, which is not just temporality, the time it takes, it's the temporality / scale. So I'm very interested in what does it mean to somatically take an experience with you from a space. Somatically, the way we store things in our muscle, like a positive or a not so positive trauma almost. Another experiment, the downtown Stockholm green dye, it's called uranin. It's used for ocean biologists and so on, so it's not so dangerous. But essentially, it's fluorescent, which is lovely, right? So you of course, finally, I'm with people who know. It means that the daylight, the UV in the daylight makes it really look much better than even on the photo. And it really is not toxic. And this is the parliament in Sweden. This is now 15 years ago, and it's so interesting also that reality has changed since then. Right nowadays, these things would look and come across as being different, being in our society the way it is today, which is pretty wild. Right? But do you see what I mean? It's a watercolor if you want, a big one, but a light project. So, how are we on time, Michael? So now I skip through a few projects. So let me just take a deep breath here. So this is how I work. I'm very interested in the user being a participant. I'm very interested in the general dematerialization of the objecthood as such, to allow for the body or the presence of the person to become almost the exposed, well, at least the protagonist, right? The public space. The people are the protagonist. How, as I said, do we facilitate the sharing without doing it on the expense of the shared, but do it on the behalf of the shared? What is the interest? What are the resources? What are the power structures? Not power like in energy, but power like in political power. This project here was an improvised project. This is the town hall in Copenhagen, Rådhuset. It's an amazing building. And it's a few weeks before the UN were getting together, the scientific group of the UN, we proposed the city of Copenhagen that Greenland, which by all means is a part of Denmark, even though Denmark very often forgets, but the point is, we have so much ice in the backyard. Why don't we have some of the ice celebrating the UN COP21 in Denmark, hosting, environment? And they will be walking by there because they're going to have a dinner in there, and so on. And the town hall was quite happy about it, and so on and so forth. point being that obviously a 300 or 400 page climate report is hard to understand, especially written by scientists, and of course it's not for everybody to read anyway, but you can put your hand on the ice for 2 seconds and you've read the whole report, which is so not true, of course. But the point is here, I do think that the somatic muscle that I was talking about, the experiential potential, the confidence we have in trusting how we feel without necessarily having quantified or rationalized or verified it in numbers yet. And this was the project where I said, let's come together here on this front of the city hall while all the sort of intellectual leaders are gathering on the inside, and let's just hold hands with the ice in Greenland. There's 100 tons there, which is, on the high summer, is exactly what disappears in a 100th of a second. Right, so there's a bit with the numbers there, where there's, it's like, this is like gone already 10 times in a second, no, 100 times in a second, I don't remember, I'm sorry, but it's just like so beyond belief, right, because Greenland is the size it is and so on and so forth. So, ice from Greenland into Denmark, a little bit of, polluting on the way because all that container stuff and so on, but it's normally full of shrimps and otherwise. So, and then of course, I'm quite serious with regards to walking up to this ice, which is already a few 100,000 years old, and then holding hands with it. It's amazing. It's really, really very, very touching. Besides that, it also became a gathering where people did not, just like being on the beach, have to fully verbalize everything, and still they could share it and be together. There was great debates. People they were disagreeing. There was it was a space where it was okay to not be the same, right? And of course, ideally speaking, Copenhagen takes great pride in being a space where you do not have to be the same. But we all know, especially nowadays, that every city, and Copenhagen too, is struggling with matching up its inclusive ambitions with its sense of reality. So thinking and doing is disconnected. That's what I meant, right? It says it's very inclusive, but in fact, it's really struggling, just like most other European countries, with regards to inclusivity is for the time being. But the project here is now on the way because the mayor of Paris got so excited, Anna Delgango, Anna. And so she called, and only a few weeks ago said, we have to bring the ice to Paris. Where is it? She said. And I said, it is gone. And it's so interesting because for her it was like, it was like a camp, and but she's lovely, so I'm not, but it's just, this is how we think, right? It's so interesting, and so, but there's plenty, there's still some left. We can just go and get it, and so on and so forth, right? So this is a entropic space. I worked with Zumtobel creating a light ceiling. So this is Louisiana Museum in Denmark. It's just such an amazing architecture, I think. And the skylights are not really very strong because they have to also be able to have paintings sensitive to light inside and so on and so forth. So with Zumtobel, I made this sun simulator with large LED boxes, but we put gray filter on it. And as you will, of course, know, if you put a gray filter, it's like putting a color filter. So the tone of the light was a little bit gray, which is so funny because everybody and everything looks a little more gray than we are already. And so it was a space in which there was absolutely no shadows, totally shadow-free, very brightly lit. Everybody always talked about the stone. This is blue basalt, colorless, from Iceland, from Thorsmark, one of the side offsprings of Thorsmark. This is how it looks in the spring. The snow is gone. There's a little bit of water left, and this is the old door. Oh, I actually have see. So this is the old door. Right? This is we punched in the lovely architecture. This little bit of brutality is lovely too, right? So we punched a new door through the walls, and so on and so forth, and allowed for people to sort of find their way. No paths, no indication, no front and back, no rules. Except that you shouldn't, of course, break everything. And people took stones, built stuff in it, and so on and so forth. So very experiential. Some people saw apocalypse, mudslides, right? Some people saw Japanese gardens, contemplativity, life. So, very old project. This is a show just showing the sun in Los Angeles in 96 or 7, I think. Yeah, okay, it's sort of easy. And what is nice is, as we all know, and you know in particular, it's so exciting to talk here because I finally don't have to explain, it's because the sun is moving that the light is moving on the floor. But of course we also know that the truth is that the sun is actually not moving. It's the earth moving, because otherwise, everything would be different. But essentially, you can actually, and this is what I think the show was addressing, you can actually see it move. If you stand still and you take a little bit of time, you can see the earth moving around the sun, which is, I think, a lovely moment when you kind of connect with that experience. So, let me just now end with this project here, because it's one that Lars Krag Rasmussen asked me to do. I didn't ask me to do it like this. This is how then I chose to present it to him. This is at the VKR, at the headquarters of Velux in Denmark. And lovely with the snow here. It looks, of course, even better. But what I guess you can see it's a kind of heliogram, like a sun diagram, right? And this is exactly for this particular spot, exactly how the sun sets and rises and moves and so on and so forth, except that the horizon line, this one out here, is in the eye level of the parents of the Krag Rasmussen family, as Lars Krag Rasmussen's parents. So this means that what we see here, and where there is no glass, as you can see, the glass is kind of cutting here, that is the way the sun travels when it is below the horizon. So what it is an exact drawing of the sun, and then I wanted to do a kind of a rainbow reference, or the kind of color spectrum. It is, in fact, it does go the full spectrum from this perspective here. You just can't see it. And as you can see, here it is. What time do we have here? You can sort of see what month it is. The camera is in the position. So let's just see. So this is 12, 1, 2, 3, right? So this is 3:20, and this is in the month of. See now, how does it work? End of February, right? So this is then, of course, the summer, and this is the winter, right? This is the high summer. The longest day of the year is up here. That's why, for the people who don't know these schemes. But I worked on various occasions with this amazing shape that orbital life of our little planetary system offers us. And this, I think, is a great way to see a model, not just of the sun, but essentially of time. And should you choose to place yourself in the center, you can also actually see what time and what day and where you are. And if we know where we are, we also know who we are, as we know. So do you mind me just popping through a few images, because I want to get towards the end? Michael, how are we on time? Oh, good. Yeah. Let's just take this one. So a long corridor, very long, 90 meters, full of smoke, kind of claustrophobic a little bit for some people, but generally, as you can see, you walk into this smoke corridor, and the first thing is, disregarding that it's very bright, is that you go blind. And I try to measure it. There's roughly 8 seconds before you realize that your ears are not so bad after all, because you kind of start to go very slow. We have it down to the distance you can see is between 1 meter and 1.50 meters about. The camera seems to pick up a little different. But as you walk through the tunnel, as you can see, the light changes, that gets darker and so on and so forth. Point here, and it's not just one point, because obviously it's very ephemeral. It's quite exciting, because you go through a series of wow and oh type of experiences, like, am I lost? But it turns out that we are quite navigatorily speaking robust. Even when we lose a guiding sense, such as the eyes, we are very quickly replacing our sort of ability to navigate with something else, which I think seems to suggest that what we take for granted as being the truthful main navigator, the eyes, is in fact a cultural construct. We don't need, well, it's not so bad, but we don't necessarily need the eyes, and they certainly do not tell us the truth. As all of you know, of course, color is relative, light is relative, context, light and context, and everything is, created by the brain anyway. But if we know, or if we have confidence in taking the authorship of seeing, instead of just seeing that instead of just thinking that seeing is taking in the world, actually seeing is projecting or producing the world. Right? So I'm a little bit back to what I said before, consumer versus producer. If you have the confidence in your way of looking at the world is your way of producing the world, you are more likely to be a change agent. Right? Do you see how you see yourself in relation to the world in a slightly different light compared to should you just see yourself as a passive consumer? Let's go on a bit. Heliotropism again, the shadows. This is where I grew up in Iceland. This is my friend Philip. So we have these shadows all the time. I just enjoy it for a second. It's just so lovely. But you have heard so much about it. This is my studio. We do a lot of light experiments, very irrational and, based on very unsophisticated things. And occasionally I actually get around to then measure. So the library where we read books, as you can see, have much better light than the room in which we paint, where we need the light. Right? So do you see, this basically has no yellow color in it, and I'm doing a yellow painting. Just so funny, right? As here, but here I guess the bigger windows and so on and so forth. So this is the artist's freedom, I guess you can say, that I am. So we do play around with light quite a bit, splitting up shadows, color separation, diacrylic filters, all kinds of experiments, solar and heliotropic, illuminating corners in museums that are otherwise not illuminatable, and the general study of what does light without anything else in general also offer you. What type of hospitality, what type of quality do you have, time to actually see the changing light? This is in Malmö, the quality of the changing light outside versus the artificial light. This is artificial, this is the real light. The artificial light is duplicating 6 months later at the very same place, digitally controlled. So every day the digital light would play a light from another day. As you know, these things have suddenly become very easy to do. And monochromatic light and the experience of colors within the context of monochrome. And then I've worked a lot with museum lighting systems to see and suggest what types of lights. In this case, it's a Kandinsky painting at in Munich. Things that are also new. White pigments, we worked a lot in the studio with white pigments. These are the 96 white pigments that are currently on the market very fast, eradicated. But this is the white paint in museums. And it turns out that all museums are titanium dioxide white. Titanium dioxide, I think, right? But there's so many whites, so the relativity of white again. So anyway, so now I'm done. Yeah? So let me just say one last thing, right? Yeah. So how does it then feel to have energy in your hand? Was one of the questions. I've been addressing the need to develop gradually the confidence in that light and energy is something that we need to understand it in a palpable, emotional, physical, somatic way. Right? We need to understand what is the world around us when it is not delivered in a data sheet. Right? If we are going to have a relationship with it, we might as well exercise our skills to question ourselves, well, what's the consequences of my actions, emotionally speaking? I think we know enough, right? We know everything. Certainly you know enough. How do we translate the knowledge, the thinking, into doing? And I think our senses, our bodies, I would like to suggest that our social skills are very much integrated in our senses and our bodies. Our self-confidence is not just in our head, it's very physical also. And this is out of this project in which, well, how does it feel to hold energy in your hand? This became the Little Sun project, and just very quickly, it's a solar panel, very good one, and then an LED and a rechargeable battery on the inside. It has a The first one had 1,000 charge cycles, which gives you 3 years, right? Every day, we charge it every day, 3 years. And the new one has it for 5 years, so it's like incredible. That will take 1 canister of petroleum out of use every day, right? There's 90 gram of plastic here, which is roughly 1 day of petroleum burning, kerosene burning, right? So approximately, so we try to find a renewable, energy-friendly type of way of addressing this, and clearly we are hoping to solve the fact that 1 in 7 person in the world have no access to power. So we just need to do 1 billion and 0.1 or 2, a billion of those, get them out. But we also want to introduce the fact, well, if you grow up with something that teaches you, well, I can harvest my energy, and I actually have a degree of control on my energy use, and I can use it in the nighttime for kids. I'm more likely, once I grow up and I get 20 years old, and I have to make a decision, what type of energy do I feel comfortable with, right? So it's really about also gradually introducing something which is very much about understanding it physically in the use. So we have done a lot of dancing exercises, because it's a somatic relationship. Because kids, when they dance with the light, they go, oh, I remember this. It was a dance. So it's so interesting to say, well, it's about the climate, but it's about physicality. If we can be physical, we can also change, right? Nothing changes if we stand still. So out of this project grew, and you can see we came at it from slightly different angles, but we're really aiming at competing with the oil industry, which is why we keep doing campaigns and doing things. And today we launched a mobile phone solar charger, which I could talk forever and ever about. But what I just briefly want to say, and we should go on in our program, the mobile, and I'll advertise a little bit for myself, I'm sorry. Yesterday, well, 24 hours ago, as it says, we launched it on Kickstarter, because we're a little short of cash. But essentially, we raised almost $50,000 the last 24 hours to get solar-powered mobile phone chargers out at a price where they are compatible with the ways people are charging their mobile phones in sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, which is where we more normally work, but also in a design language with the kind of story that I've been talking to you about today, so that it works in the more affluent parts of the world, such as here in London, or online, and so on and so forth. So I, of course, want to say this because I want you to go and probably for the first time go on Kickstarter and buy one, because now we're selling it just at a very lowest price to drive the production price down to make it affordable in a situation where it actually makes a difference whether it is $25, $26, $27, $28, right? So the more we sell now, the more we can produce, the more the price goes down, just to be very blunt. So exciting, and very exciting, because it was also the beginning of a discussion with Velux, and I was working on this work of art, and I realized that the complexity of daylight and the confidence in that daylight is not just daylight, but it's a lot of other things also, was something that we had in common. When I say we, it was many of the great teams at Velux, and of course Lars Kahn being so obsessed with it was very inspiring. And then Velux got back to Lillesund, suggesting that, well, now the company is actually about to have an anniversary, and why don't we do something together? And with this light, well, how do we harvest light? How do we have light in our hand? What does that feel like? And so on and so forth. And that was the beginning of a collaboration that I would like to sort of talk a little bit about. Can you just show? I think I might have oh, that's me with the mobile charger, and I'll just keep that up to inspire you. This parrot is when you do this Kickstarter stuff, it's so horrible anyway, if you ask me. But this is a movie rental parrot to prevent the attention span of people to deteriorate 30 seconds into the Kickstarter film. So at least you could look at the film just for that, to see how long time do you have patience to look at some kind of internet film, right? So we spoke to Kickstarter, they said 40 seconds, if you haven't delivered the message in 40 seconds, you're out. And we needed 3 minutes, and they said, no, just forget it. Then I said, okay, I'll rent a parrot. But then people can, and then so it's good to be an artist after. after all. But essentially, that's what it is. It looks like I actually have a parrot, but it's a movie rental parrot, which is so used to doing all kinds of tricks. It's lovely. But getting back to Velux. So Velux and asked us if we would get involved with this amazing outreach they have with regards to design students, engineering and industrial design students around the world. And I think we had, Eliasson then designed a campaign, an outreach, a verbalization together with Velux, but we were lucky to be able to use the occasion to expose ourselves a little bit, let the sun shine, so to speak. And 800 students submitted, student teams submitted, which means there was more than 1,000 from, I think, I took it down here, I think it's like, from many schools around the world. I don't have the number of the schools here, but essentially 172 complete projects were submitted, and it was incredible because they were from literally all over the world. It was so exciting. So it was not just, you know, Denmark and Sweden or something. So it was interesting to see that Velux, in a way, there was a few from Denmark, but there was a lot from literally around the world, which of course we were very excited about because it gave us an opportunity to reach out and talk to young people from around the world, which was incredibly interesting. And of course, the whole idea that these kids, and I mean kids in a good way, they were so interested in the equation with sustainability, daylight, access to light. The fact that we all own the sun together seems to be a big driver. Nobody owns the sun, you could also say nobody owns it yet, but no. So this fact that the sun it has that element of collectivity with which I, of course, having done the works I do, I can identify. So that was very touching. And you will see the winner in a second, but what is happening now is that Velux is then producing 29,000 of the lamps, which this winner did, and these 29,000 lamps, a big portion of them are going to work in a circular economy type of projects in sub-Saharan Africa. The 3 countries are Senegal, Zimbabwe, and Zambia, where we are already working with great partners. I just want to highlight this. So it is not a project, it's not an aid project, right? It's a sort of a microeconomical effort to create a sort of financial infrastructure that allows local entrepreneurs to grow, which is how one does things nowadays, it seems. What is important about this is because a lot of people, meaning no bad harm, say, why don't you just give it away? What's the matter with you? And if we would give all these lamps from Velux away, and this one for that matter, the local shop down the street selling electronic goods would go out of business, and so on. So it sort of goes without saying. I just think it's worth mentioning. So one thing is the design, the discussion, the sustainability, to get something done at a price rate where we can compete with the oil industry. So there's that whole challenge. And then to actually deliver to the people without having an impact which is counterproductive to their social dynamic infrastructure in the local environment. It's also a big challenge, right? So the project is actually, we tend to think of a design here, right? But this project, and I think it's worth mentioning that Velux went to a great effort to make sure that the best practice that they're also exercising in in everything they do is really about understanding the distance between thinking and all the way, I mean, doing, and the action at the very end of it, which is why I think the relationship with Velux that Eliasson have had been particularly beautiful. So, I think actually, Mariana and Luca, you should come up here, and these are our next speakers. I think, Mikael, maybe you want to